The beach was quiet. I could hear seagulls in the distance, their cries blending with the ever-present wash of the surf. It was a beautiful morning, but not as beautiful as the young woman standing in front of me. She was wearing a short red miniskirt and a white blouse. "How much?" I called out to her as I approached. Experience had taught me not to drag it out, to just get straight to the point. The girl was startled when she heard me, but she masked it well. A professional, then. That would make my work easier. She looked me up and down, no doubt taking in my outfit and overall look. $500, she said after a moment. I nodded. "Come, my car is parked over there." I beckoned as I turned and started walking away from the beach. I knew she was following me, and my blood ran like electricity throughout my body. The anticipation made stars dance in front of my eyes. All the tools were already set. I had taken enough lessons, and I had taken all necessary precautions. Just a few more feet, and we'd be at my car. "My car's just up ahead," I said to the girl, turning to take a quick look at her. That's when I messed up. I didn't hide my inner thoughts when I turned to look at her. I didn't mask the hunger burning like fires of perdition inside my soul. And she saw it. Maybe she didn't know exactly what she was looking at, but some primal instinctive part of her must have warned her what it meant. Danger. "I'm sorry, I don't think I can go with you," she said, backing away slowly. "I'll give you $1K, I coaxed, moving closer to her. I knew at this point money couldn't move her. I could see the terror in her eyes. She was all animal instinct now, ready to bolt, but I hoped it would distract her enough for just a few seconds. I lunged, my hands outstretched, intending to grab her torso. The girl reacted a sliver of a second faster than me, and my fingertips brushed against her blouse. "Shit!" I spat, and sped off after her, my feet thumping on the sand. This was going wrong. The plan didn't involve chasing after her. She was supposed to come to the car willingly. This would mess up everything. I was fit for a 60-year-old, but the girl had the advantage of youth. Slowly but surely, the gap between us widened. Stupid, stupid, stupid! Why in the bloody hell had I left my gun in the car? It was the stupid mistakes like these that had gotten all those others caught. I ran after her for a few more yards before she became a hazy dot on the beachfront. I gave up. I slumped to my knees, wheezing. It was still okay. Nothing had really happened. I would just try again, with a better plan this time. I remained on the ground, catching my breath, eyes closed as the salty sea air entered my labored lungs. When I opened my eyes, I was struck with confusion. There were boots in front of me. I raised my eyes to came face to face with a police officer. Behind him was the girl. Shit, I groaned as the world came crashing down around me. From here on, I knew what would happen. It was all over for me. The cop would take me in. They would see the guns in my car, the ropes, the chloroform. Shit. From there, it was obvious they would go back to my house and find all my books, all my documentaries on serial killers, my treasured lessons. The guns would certainly do me in. Plus, my house wasn't clean yet. I was sure I still had some stuff I needed to dispose of, taken from the others. "You have the right to remain silent," the police officer droned on. But I tuned him out. Even as I felt the cold metal of the handcuffs against my wrists, I only had eyes for the girl who had ruined everything. She stood a little away behind the cop, her hands shaking, the true terror in her eyes. Good. She should be afraid after what she had done, after what her actions were going to stop.
I used to work at a Chipotle several years ago. I didn't really work there for that long, just a few months, but it was long enough for something really crazy to happen. So I was working one night until close, which was 10 p.m. The Chipotle that I worked at was sort of in the middle of a huge shopping area. There were many stores like Target, Walmart, Costco, and others within a mile radius. There was also all the restaurants and smaller stores you could imagine as well, and sort of in the middle of this was the Chipotle. So things got pretty quiet at Chipotle at around 8 or 9 p.m. For the final hour, things really dragged on. Hardly anybody came in to order, so we started doing some cleaning. I went out and started to sweep the dining room area and clean the tables and stuff. By that point, there was just a few of us employees still there, and no customers sitting around. As I was sweeping towards the front of the store, I remember that I saw something weird. This guy came running into the parking lot at like a full sprint. He went right through it and then disappeared past the building. I only saw him for like a second because he was really flying. It seemed really weird, but I just kept working. We closed maybe 15 minutes later, and then soon after, I got off. I left the Chipotle and walked out to my car in the parking lot and got inside. My coworkers left as well, but I stayed in my car and was texting and Snapchatting some friends before I drove home. However, I was interrupted when I remember seeing something out of the corner of my eye in the mirror. I saw the running man again. He was sprinting into the parking lot once more, this time from another angle. However, as he approached my car, he slowed down to a jog. Then he went to my passenger's side door and stopped. He knocked on the window, and for some reason I rolled it down a crack. I guess I was just curious as to what he wanted and why he was running around. The man was out of breath, and he asked if I could give him a ride. I had no idea who he was, and sprinting around like that was pretty weird, so I didn't want to. I said no, I couldn't. The guy then practically started begging me. He said he really needed just a quick ride and promised that it wouldn't be very far. I asked him where he was going. He started looking around and just said up the road. It seemed really sketchy. Then, without me even answering, the guy just gave a frustrated scoff and then frantically left. He ran away, sprinting out of the parking lot again. At that point, I figured that I should get out of there and drive home before he changed his mind and ran back or something. So I left the Chipotle and started heading home. On my way back when I was on the road, I noticed about 5 police cars with flashing lights driving on the other side of the road. They were heading towards where I had come from. I didn't know what it was, but I didn't put 2 and 2 together yet. The next morning, though, I saw it on the news. One of the businesses in that same general shopping area had been robbed at gunpoint by a man. It was the same man who I had seen running. He stole a bunch of cash, and it was less than a mile from the Chipotle. Then he ran off. I guess he also attempted a carjacking, which did not work out. He ended up being caught about a mile from the shopping center later that night in a nearby woods. I realized that I had probably seen him running from the scene of the crime, and if I had agreed to give him a ride, who knows what could have happened. I wasn't really that scared in the moment when it happened, but after the fact, it seemed a lot scarier. This happened about a year and a half ago, roughly. One night, after a long day of work, I was driving home and I stopped at Subway. By now, it was starting to get late, and I was craving a foot-long Italian herbs and cheese sub. So I pulled into the parking lot, parked my car, and then went inside. I started ordering what I wanted, and things were going well. However, when I was about to pay, the Subway employee said something strange. He asked me if I had driven there by myself. At first, I didn't know what to say. It didn't really sound creepy the way he had said it, but it was not a normal thing to ask. Then he said that he just saw a man enter my car, and that's why he was asking. You see, I was facing the Subway counter, and my back was turned to the parking lot. Out the window, I guess the Subway workers saw somebody enter my car. I said that I had gone there alone, and I immediately turned around to look at my car. I didn't see anything anymore because it was nighttime and too dark to see in the windows of my vehicle. I walked over to the window and looked closer, but still couldn't see anything. The Subway employee told me that he saw a guy walk out from near the road and then approach my car. Apparently, the guy just opened one of the doors and went right inside. During this time, I drove a pretty old car, and the doors actually didn't lock. So I would never keep anything valuable in the car, and I had never had a problem with it to that point. I asked the man if he was sure, probably because I just couldn't believe it. But there were no other cars nearby in the parking lot. He said yes, and then I decided to call the police. I reported what happened, and I told them that some guy was inside of my car. Then when I got the sandwich, I just ate it inside while I waited for the cops. When they got there, they found a man hiding in the back seat of my car. I'm really grateful to that Subway employee. If he had not seen the man enter my car, who knows what would have happened. I had not seen the man before and didn't know who he was. I don't know if the guy knew my car didn't lock or if it was just random and he got lucky. Either way, it was a close call that night.
I hate driving late at night, but it's part of the job. My last delivery had taken me way out of town, and by the time I was heading home, the highway was nearly deserted. Just the occasional pair of headlights in the rearview mirror or the faint red glow of taillights far ahead. I wasn't far from home when I saw the sign for the detour. Road work ahead. Take the alternate route. Great, I muttered, flipping on my turn signal. The detour led me down a smaller, darker road, surrounded by thick trees on both sides. I'd driven this route once before, a shortcut that shaved about 10 minutes off the drive. It was winding and narrow, but at this hour, I figured it'd be empty. I drove for a few miles, the headlights barely illuminating the road ahead. The thick trees closing on both sides. The detour was supposed to be a shortcut, but it felt like it was pulling me deeper into some forgotten part of the world. My grip tightened on the steering wheel as the road twisted and turned. I had taken this path before, but tonight, something felt different, off, like I was being pulled into a place that I shouldn't be. The occasional flicker of moonlight through the trees only added to the eerie feeling, casting long, jagged shadows. I checked the rearview mirror, but there was no sign of the usual traffic behind me. It was as if the world had fallen away, and I was the only one left on this forgotten stretch of road. I slowed down, my headlights catching something strange up ahead. There was a clearing, a break in the trees. At first, I thought it was just another abandoned roadside. But the closer I got, the more the scene didn't make sense. A stone structure stood at the center of the clearing, weathered and jagged, half hidden by the underbrush. It didn't belong here. I was already on edge, but something about this place made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I considered turning around, but there was no sign of another path, and my gut told me it would be even worse if I didn't figure out what was going on. I creeped forward, headlights illuminating the clearing more fully now. My stomach churned when I saw what was at the center. A pentagram, drawn hastily in the dirt with something dark, probably blood, at the points. And in the middle, a goat was tied to a post, its eyes wide with fear, its bleats echoing in the otherwise silent night. The air smelled foul, like something was rotting. I froze, not sure what to do. This wasn't just some weird campsite or vandalism. This felt like something darker, something wrong. I turned the wheel, slowly pulling my car to the edge of the clearing, my mind racing. What the hell is going on here? Why was a goat tied up like that? My breath quickened as I checked my rearview mirror again, hoping I wasn't being followed. But then, I saw movement. A figure emerged from the woods, stepping out of the shadows. It was a man, tall, with ragged clothes, his face obscured by the dark. He walked towards the clearing with deliberate steps, his hands hidden in the folds of his coat. My pulse skipped. Something about his posture, the way he moved, made my gut twist in fear. I stared at the car again, my hands trembling as I reached for the gear shift. Maybe if I just drove away, I could pretend I hadn't seen anything. Maybe. Then the man stopped. He turned towards me, his eyes locking on mine even from that distance. I felt my breath catch in my throat. His hands emerged from his coat, holding a long, curved knife, gleaming in the moonlight. It wasn't a hunting knife. It was too ceremonial, too deliberate. "Hello there. Are you lost?" he drawled. And then in one fluid motion, he began walking towards me. My instinct screamed at me to drive, but I was paralyzed. My foot frozen on the brake, my heart pounding in my chest, a raw, terrifying beat that drowned out all other sound. I don't know who this guy was, or why he was carrying a knife in the middle of nowhere, but I knew one thing: I had to get out of here. I slammed my foot on the gas, swerving the car towards the road, but my tires skidded on the gravel, slipping on the loose earth. The engine roared as I fought to keep control. I looked on my side mirror and saw him. He was running now, fast, his knife gleaming as he cut through the underbrush, closing in. Panic surged through me. I couldn't outrun him. I couldn't even see the road anymore. The trees had closed in, and all I could hear was the sound of my own ragged breathing and the distant footsteps of the man chasing me. I turned sharply, steering wildly as the road became even narrower, the trees nearly scraping against the car. My headlights flickered as I forced my foot onto the accelerator, my hands white-knuckled on the wheel. Behind me, the man was getting closer, his figure darting between the trees, his speed unnerving. He wasn't just running, he was hunting. I could almost hear his heavy breathing, his footsteps growing louder. The road ahead was almost a dead end. The clearing was closed, but there was no exit. I had to make it there. I had to. And then, the car broke through, the trees parted, and I saw the end of the road, a sharp drop ahead leading to a ravine. There was nowhere to go. The man was just a few feet away now. I panicked, throwing the car into reverse and slamming the gas, sending gravel flying as the car spun backwards, tires screeching. I could see the man, his face contorted with rage, the knife held high. He was close, too close. With one final push, I slammed my foot onto the floor, and the car lurched forward. I didn't wait to look back. My foot stayed on the accelerator. Speeding down the narrow road, the man's figure disappeared into the trees. I didn't stop until I was back on the main road, the familiar highway lights flooding my view. My hands shook as I gripped the wheel, my breath still ragged. I glanced back once, checking my rearview mirror. No one. No man. No knife. No strange clearing. Just the empty road behind me. My pulse still raced, and in the pit of my stomach, a question lingered. What had the man been doing? What was the goat for?
I worked at Chipotle for a while up until about 2 years ago. Towards the end of my time there, I remember this one incident that really made me want to quit. So I was working behind the counter, and it had been a kind of busy evening. By now, it was maybe 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night, so it was just starting to quiet down. There were a good number of people eating inside, and there was finally no line of people waiting to order anymore. I remember that a man walked in and approached me at the counter. I asked him what he wanted, and he proceeded to try to use every so-called hack and strategy under the book. He started out by asking for a bowl with brown rice and half chicken, half steak, and asked me to, quote, load it up. I asked him if he wanted a double serving of chicken or steak, and he said no, he just wanted 1/2 of each. So I gave him a generous serving of rice, but I wasn't going to risk getting in trouble and being reckless. I've never considered myself to be stingy when working there. I know some people are, but I want the customer to be happy. However, there's a line between generous and reckless. Anyways, I gave him a good amount of chicken and steak. In fact, he nearly got a full serving of each. But then after I scooped them, he was like, "Come on, you can do better." I told him I'm not giving him any more without it being a double order. Then he said he would get a double order and told me to give the exact same amount of each again. By now, I was getting really annoyed. So we finally moved on to the other ingredients, and the man asked for extra of every other thing. Then he of course asked for several extra tortillas on the side and stuff. He also asked for guacamole, and even after I told him it was extra, he said yes. Then he asked for extra guac. By that point, the bowl was like overflowing and I could barely close it with the lid. When I was ringing him up, he suddenly freaked out and said that he was not paying extra for guac. He rambled about how it doesn't cost extra anymore, which was a total lie. He also claimed that he never asked for extra chicken or steak, which he did. He called for my manager, who came by and sided with me. She saw how full the bowl was and just how much meat was in there, and she knew that there was no way that was a single serving. The man said that he refused to pay. I told him that he could leave then. By now, I was really ticked off. The guy's whole personality just really made me mad. After arguing back and forth for a short time, he then took out his cell phone and started recording me. Then he started yelling really loud, getting the whole restaurant's attention that he was, quote, getting scammed, and he started saying that I should be fired. My manager and I just stared at him and let him make a fool of himself. Everyone else in the restaurant was just staring at him like he was a weirdo. Then, after he was done with his 30-second rant, he suddenly just grabbed the bowl and made a run for it. We let him because I wasn't going to chase after this guy and tackle him for a bowl of Chipotle. Then my manager called the police. We reported the whole incident and I was able to leave a while later. I'm not sure if the man was ever found or what, but not long after, I quit. That was by far the craziest thing that ever happened when I worked there. I used to work at a Subway restaurant years ago. There's one event that took place that I will never forget. It led to me eventually quitting because it was so crazy. So it all started one Thursday night when I was working. I had worked at the Subway for a while and was pretty experienced. We closed at 10 p.m. and I was working a closing shift on this night. I was also working by myself because things would be very quiet the last couple of hours generally. There were customers coming in and ordering subs here and there that night, but not too many. Overall, it was pretty quiet. I remember at about 9 p.m. I heard somebody enter and I went over to the bread area to take their order. It was a man who I remember had dark brown hair as well as a beard. He was wearing a beanie hat and a sweatshirt and jeans. He walked up and started ordering like normal. I don't remember what exactly he got, but it was a pretty typical foot-long sub. Nothing really stood out about the guy, except he seemed sort of confused at what he wanted sometimes. He changed his mind on several occasions and asked for extra of a few things. When the sandwich was complete, I moved over to the end of the counter at the cash register. After I wrapped the sub, I told the guy his total and I entered it into the register. That's when the man told me that he didn't have any money at all. I stopped what I was doing and looked at him. He went on to say that since the sandwich was already made, I may as well give it to him for free. I wasn't going to do that though. I said no, and I told him I wasn't going to give him anything for free. And looking back, I don't regret it at all. If the man went through all the trouble of ordering knowing the whole time he didn't plan on paying, he shouldn't have come in at all. The guy asked me again, and I could tell that he was getting angry, but I still said no. I was nervous of how he would react, and at first he seemed fine. The man stopped talking and then turned and just walked right out of the restaurant. I was glad that he was gone. However, less than 30 seconds later, the door opened again and the man walked back inside. This time he was walking very quickly like he was on a mission. He walked right up to the counter where you order. Then he jumped up, turned, and with both feet kicked the glass divider that goes in front of the food about as hard as he could. It was one of the craziest things I've ever witnessed. It caused the man to fall to the ground. Thankfully, the glass did not break, but the shelf of chips that went along the front of it did break and all the chip bags fell to the floor. The man quickly got up from the ground, yelled a curse word, and then started walking over to the end of the counter. This is where you would enter to go behind the counter to where the employees only area was. I didn't want to take any chances, and I went to my right and into the back room. As I got back there, I glanced behind me and I saw that the man was in fact heading behind the counter. I didn't know if he was coming after me or not, and I knew that I needed to get away. So I went through the back room to this exit door that we had. It was normally not used, but I had to get out of there. So I left out that door, ran around the subway through the parking lot, and then got to my car. When I got inside, I called the cops. I told them what was going on, and then I waited. The man did not seem to leave the subway the entire time. When the cops got there about 5 minutes later, the man was still there. They found him inside and arrested him. He had almost trashed the whole place. It turned out that he was on drugs as well. I don't know what would have happened if I had stayed in the subway. I'm not sure if he would have come after me and tried to attack me or something, but I'm really glad for that exit door that was in the back. This happened when I was much younger, and it was back way before the clown trends of like 2016 where everybody was dressing up as clowns. I was about 10 years old, and I lived with my parents and my older sister. One night, though, I found myself home alone. I can't remember exactly where my sister was, but my parents were at family's, but it was something where I would have been really bored. I didn't stay at home by myself too often. Our house and neighborhood was pretty normal for the most part. We had a small-sized front yard as well as backyard. The neighborhood street was generally pretty quiet, but we had a good amount of neighbors. After my parents left, I probably just watched TV in the living room and hung out. I don't remember exactly what I did. A few hours in though, at maybe 9 p.m., I remember that I heard this noise. I couldn't quite tell what it was, but it sounded like it was coming from the front door area. Like maybe it was somebody knocking on the door but quietly, or maybe they were trying to unlock the door or open it. I couldn't quite make out what exactly the sound was, but for a moment I thought that maybe my parents were home already. After not hearing anything for the next few seconds, I decided to get up and look. I walked over towards the front door. As soon as I was walking past it though, I saw a clown standing there. I noticed through the little window on the front door. There was a guy wearing a clown mask just standing there, literally staring right into the door. I was not expecting to see it at all. I jumped back and then ran all the way upstairs. Then I found a phone and I called my parents. However, they did not answer at the time. I was really scared from seeing the clown man. I didn't hear any more noises or anything, so I went over to an upstairs window where I could look outside near the front door. When I did, I saw that the clown man was now gone. This made me feel a little bit better. I didn't know why he had been there in the first place, but it seemed as though he was gone now. So I went back downstairs and then looked around out the front window. I still didn't see the clown anywhere, so I returned to the living room couch and resumed watching TV. Sometime later, maybe like 30 minutes, I got up to go into the kitchen. When I was doing this, I passed by a back window, and that's when I saw him again. The guy dressed as a clown was standing right on the other side of one of the windows and looking into the house. As soon as I saw him, I immediately turned and ran away. This time I ran upstairs and went all the way to my bedroom. I was really scared and did not want to leave my room at all. However, not long after this, as I was hiding under my blankets, there was a call on the phone. I left my bedroom and went out into the hallway and answered it. It was my parents calling back. I told them what was going on, and they said that they were on the way home now. I went back into my room and hid there for the rest of the time until my parents returned. When they did, the clown was gone. My dad searched the entire property, but the clown was nowhere to be seen. I was glad that he was gone, and I'm not sure why he was there in the first place. Maybe it was just somebody trying to be funny, but going into the backyard and looking through a window is a little too far for a prank if you ask me. After that night, I didn't want to stay at home alone for a long time. This is something that happened not too long ago. I go to Chipotle all the time, and it's one of my favorite restaurants. There are also several locations that are pretty close to where I live. So most of the time when I get it, I order on the app, and then I just stop by and pick it up. Every time it's just waiting in the bag on the shelf inside the restaurant. I also get points on the app, and then I end up getting free stuff. Many times I get it on my way back from work or the gym when I'm starving. This is a routine that I've done pretty regularly for probably over a year. One time, a few months ago, I ordered Chipotle on my way home from work like many other times. By the time I arrived at the Chipotle, I went inside and my order was done and on the shelf. I picked it up and left. Then I drove the rest of the way back home. After getting back to my apartment, I took the food out of the bag, but I noticed something else. There was an SD card that was inside the bag as well. It was like a random SD card that goes in a camera and you can connect it to your computer. I thought that maybe it was a mistake, but then I realized, how could that be possible? Somebody had to have put it in there on purpose. You don't just accidentally drop an SD card into a bag of Chipotle. I was curious, but I was also a little weirded out by this. After thinking about it for a few minutes, I decided to put the SD card in my computer. I was just too curious. Sure, I was a little worried that it might be a virus and break my computer or hack all my information, but ultimately I did it anyways. After entering the SD card in my computer, there was just one folder that was titled Folder, so I double-clicked it and it opened several images. I think it was maybe like 5 pictures. Each picture was what looked like a man wearing this really creepy mask on his face. The mask covered his entire head, and the face of the mask had wide eyes and very white skin. It also had these creepy-looking teeth. And the photos were taken with a flash in a very dark room, so I couldn't tell any other details at all. And I'm not going to lie, I was pretty creeped out. However, I figured that it was maybe just a prank. But why me? Why would somebody deliberately put this in my bag? Maybe it was random. Maybe somebody just walked up to one of the to-go orders and put it in the bag. Or maybe it was a Chipotle employee trying to be funny. The thought also occurred to me that possibly they did know who I was because I went there so often. I was considering all the possibilities, but ultimately I had no way to really find out. I wasn't going to go back to the Chipotle and investigate and interrogate the employees or anything like that, so I decided to just not go back to that Chipotle for a little while. But the story doesn't end there. It was just a few days after this when I was at home one night. It was maybe 10 o'clock and I was in my bedroom watching a show on my TV. I also live alone and have a one-bedroom place on the second floor of the building. Out of nowhere, there was a knock on the front door to my apartment. This was really strange because nothing like that had ever happened before, and I obviously was not expecting anyone. I got up and walked over to the front door out of curiosity. When I looked through the peephole, I saw a man standing there wearing that same creepy mask. He was looking right at the door. When I saw him, I'm pretty sure that I jumped back about 5 feet. In the moment, I had forgotten about the SD card and stuff, but my memory was quickly jogged. I realized that this was the same person. After a few seconds, I went back over to the door to look again. He was still there, not moving, just standing there facing the door and seemingly looking at me. He stayed there for what felt like a really long time. Then he turned and quickly walked away. I was really creeped out by the whole situation. How did he know where I lived? I didn't know what to do about it, but I told all my friends. Some of them told me to call the police, and some said that I should report it to the Chipotle. Others thought that it was funny. I didn't do anything about it though. I figured he didn't do anything illegal, and it would be pretty hard to prove to the Chipotle. Plus, what would they even do about it? Overall, it was just a really bizarre thing. For the next few days, I was nervous that the guy would come back, but he never did. I stayed away from that Chipotle and went to a different one for a while. That was like 6 months ago. I've since gone back a few times and nothing strange has happened. This still remains a mystery to me though.
Whiskey, pizza, more whiskey, loud music. It was Christmas, and I was letting loose. The holiday cheer was infectious, and the whiskey didn't hurt either. But work the next day loomed over me. So after a few more drinks, I said my goodbyes and left the apartment. The stairwell felt hotter than usual, or maybe it was just the alcohol coursing through me. I clung to the railings as I made my way down, my footsteps echoing in the quiet. Outside, the cold night air hit me, a sharp contrast to the warmth inside. I was sure I could drive. I'd been in worse shape before and still made it home. The parking lot was almost deserted, lit by dim streetlights that cast long shadows. That's when I saw them. 2 boys walked towards me. One was tall and weary, probably 16 or 17, while the other was shorter, stockier, maybe 14. "Happy holidays," I called out, my voice louder than I intended. They didn't respond. I frowned, but brushed it off. Not everyone was in the mood for pleasantries. As I walked past them, they stepped into my path. I stopped. The taller one held something in his hand. It took me a second to realize it was a can of bear spray. "Where's the bear?" I joked, laughing nervously. The tall boy raised the can and sprayed it directly into my face. Pain exploded. My eyes burned, my throat felt like it was closing, and my skin seared as if it was on fire. I staggered back, clawing at my face, screaming as the chemical sting overwhelmed me. Through the haze, I saw them closing in. The shorter boy handed something to the taller one. It was a machete. Panic gripped me as the blade caught the light, its edge gleaming. "Wait!" I screamed, but the boy swung it. The machete slammed into my ribs with a sickening crunch. Pain rippled through me as I stumbled back, raising my hands to shield myself. It didn't matter. The blade came down again and again. My shoulder, my chest, my hands. Each strike sent fresh waves of agony through me. I collapsed, curling into a ball on the asphalt. Blood pooled beneath me, warm and sticky, as the attacks continued. The shorter boy kicked me repeatedly, while the taller one swung the machete with a grim determination. Eventually, they stopped. I laid there, broken, gasping for air, my vision swimming. I couldn't even reach for my phone. The world felt distant, the pain consuming everything. Someone found me. I remember their panicked voice, the lights flashing in the ambulance, and the faint sound of sirens. As they worked to save me, I managed to cough out a laugh. "I guess I was the bear," I said, the irony not lost on me. Since you're reading this, it's clear I survived. But barely. The boys were caught, but I never found out why they attacked me. Random? Planned? I guess I'll never know. All I know is I'm still here, and for now, that's enough.
This happened a few months ago. I was hanging out at my girlfriend's apartment one night, and I ended up staying kind of late. This happened all the time, but it wasn't a big deal because I only lived a few miles away. It was just under a 10-minute drive to get back to my place. By now, as you could imagine, the roads were very quiet, so that's how I noticed that I might be getting followed not long into the drive. I didn't know for sure, but I just remembered that a car was behind me, and when I turned at one road, it did the same thing. I don't remember exactly when it started to follow me, and after the first turn, I thought nothing of it. The way back to my apartment, though, was not a straight shot, and I had to turn a few times. For the next 3 turns, the car did the same as me. I just found this odd, and we were basically the only 2 cars on the entire road. The closer we got, the more I wondered if I was being followed. Of course, with it being late at night, I was probably just feeling slightly paranoid. I didn't actually seriously believe that I was being followed, but I was curious. Then I came to a stoplight. There was a red upcoming at an intersection. To that point, I had not been able to see who was behind the wheel of the car behind me because it was too dark. When I got to the intersection, there was a bit more light there. I looked back in my mirror, and I saw who was driving. The guy looked like a clown. His face was painted, and his hair appeared dyed red. He also had a red nose on. It wasn't a funny clown, though. It just looked creepy. This was a bit unsettling, because it was nowhere near Halloween time or anything. I didn't know why some guy would be out driving late at night looking like a clown. When the light turned green, I kept going with the clown still following me. We made another turn, and I was a little bit more nervous. Soon we were approaching my apartment complex. It is several buildings with a large parking lot sort of in the middle. As I pulled into the lot, the clown did too. That's when I realized that I could not just park and try to go inside, so I kept going through the parking lot and then turned out at the next area. When I did this, the clown did not turn out of the parking lot, but kept going farther into it. I let out a sigh of relief. I got back onto the road, and I guessed that it was just a big coincidence, and for some reason somebody who lived at my apartment complex was dressed as a clown. They also happened to drive home right behind me the entire way. It was weird, but I figured I'd drive down a ways, come back, and then go inside. So I went to the end of that quiet street, then made a U-turn and headed back to the apartment complex. I made it back about 2 or 3 minutes after the clown would have arrived. I parked my car on the opposite end of the lot to where I had seen the clown going. He was nowhere in sight now, but there were a lot of cars there. After getting out of my car, I began walking for my apartment building. But that's when I saw the guy again. The clown was now walking on a sidewalk near the front of one of the buildings. When I saw him, I started to walk faster to get to my building. But when the clown saw me, it was like he was after me right away. He changed directions and was now headed for where I was. We were still a long distance away from each other though. I hightailed it for the side door of my apartment building. As soon as I started moving, I saw the clown start to run after me. This caused me to run as well. I went as fast as I could, and thankfully I was able to reach the door. I quickly went inside and made sure that the door shut behind me. Then I ran up the stairs to my floor. I didn't hear the door opening behind me, so I'm assuming that the clown did not get in. Then I went to my apartment and was finally home. I didn't get any knocks on my door or have anything strange happen. And since then, I haven't seen that crazy clown. I wonder who it was though, and why the guy followed me. Did he know who I was, or was I just a random target? Obviously, I wouldn't probably recognize the guy if I saw him, unless of course he was dressed as a clown again. I'm hoping that nothing like that happens again.
I noticed him as I stepped off the train. He was standing near the platform exit, hands shoved deep into his coat pockets. Nothing about him stood out. Average height, dark hoodie, unkempt beard. But something and the way his eyes followed me made my skin prickle. I told myself it was nothing. The holidays had me on edge, and the crowded station didn't help. Clutching my bag tighter, I walked briskly towards the exit. The chill of the winter air hit me as I left the station, my breath clouding in front of me. The streetlights buzzed faintly, casting long shadows across the empty sidewalk. I glanced over my shoulder. He was there. At first, I thought it might be a coincidence. He could have just gone the same way. But when I turned down my street, a quiet block with rows of darkened houses, he turned too. My heart began to pound. I quickened my pace, my boots crunching against the frost-covered pavement. I could hear his footsteps behind me, steady and deliberate. My apartment wasn't far, just 3 more blocks. I resisted the urge to run. Running would show fear. Running might make him chase me. I fumbled for my phone, glancing back again. He was closer now, his hood pulled up, his face partially hidden. "Hey!" I called out, trying to sound confident. "Why are you following me?" He didn't answer. I stopped in my tracks, my breath hitching. He stopped too, standing a few yards away under a flickering streetlight. He tilted his head slightly, as if considering my words, then took a slow step forward. My legs moved before my brain could catch up. I sprinted the last 2 blocks, my chest heaving, adrenaline surging. I reached my building, yanked my keys from my bag, and jammed them into the lock. My hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries to get the door open. I slammed it shut behind me and slid the deadbolt into place. For a moment, I leaned against the door, trying to catch my breath. The apartment was dark and silent. I didn't turn on the lights. If he was out there, I didn't want him to know where I was. Peering through the peephole, I saw him standing on the sidewalk, staring at my building. What did he want? I pulled out my phone to call 911, and then the blood froze in my veins. My battery was dead. I had forgotten to charge the phone earlier. I started to panic, my breath escaping my mouth in loud whooshes. Calm down. You can still charge it, I told myself, trying to get my fear under control. I froze. It went on for what feels like hours, though it was probably just a few minutes. I stood in the middle of my living room. Every nerve in my body was on high alert. Then suddenly, it stopped. I creeped back into the peephole. He wasn't there anymore. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. I saw him again through the window. He was on the street now, pacing back and forth under the streetlight. He looked agitated, muttering to himself and gesturing with his hands. And then, he did it. He unzipped his pants slowly, each movement deliberate. Then his shirt followed, then his inner garments. The man stood there in the middle of the street, naked as the day he was born, with an unhinged grin. "Here's Johnny!" he screamed, shaking his waist so his private bits were dangling back and forth. I recoiled in disgust, my stomach turning. The sight of him jarred me from my panic-induced trance. I quickly plugged my phone on the charger and dialed 911. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was the police. They were outside looking for him. I hurried to the window and pointed towards the street, where he was standing still. 2 officers approached him, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. He didn't resist when they cuffed him, though he looked back at my building one last time as they led him to their car. I watched until the red and blue lights disappeared down the street. Even then, I didn't feel safe. It took hours for the adrenaline to wear off, for my hands to stop shaking. I kept the lights off and the curtains drawn. Every noise outside made me jump. By morning, the fear hadn't faded, but the world outside seemed normal again. People walked their dogs and cars passed by, but I couldn't stop thinking about the man. Who was he? Why had he followed me? What was he planning to do? I didn't have answers, and maybe I never would. All I know was that I would never forget his face or the sound of those knocks on my door.
This happened one night like 5 years ago. I had just finished work and it had been a pretty long day. I worked at a restaurant at the time and it was open pretty late, so I didn't get off of work until nearly midnight. After leaving, I began the drive back home, which usually took about 10 minutes. I lived in a quiet town, and the roads back to my house were pretty dark and quiet as well. Mostly there were roads with either farmlands or woods on both sides. As I got closer to my neighborhood, I was driving down a pretty quiet street near a wooded area. I saw a sign on the road that said, "Construction Detour." It was completely blocking where I had to go, and the sign had white and orange stripes. It was basically blocking off the entire street. So I couldn't go the normal way home that I always did. I had no idea why the road was closed or anything like that, but I wasn't using directions to get home or anything because I knew the way. The detour was pointing to the left, so I made the turn, and I figured that it would connect to another street that led to mine. After going down this road, it started to curve, and it was much quieter than the other. It was also heavily surrounded by forest. I drove down this road for maybe a quarter mile. There were a few narrow driveways that I passed by, but then I saw what looked like a dead end. This had to be a mistake. Why would this be a detour if it was a dead-end road? My headlights were the only light at all, and as I got closer to the dead end, I saw something. It was really just woods in all directions, but then I noticed this clown face looking at me, and then there was another and another. When I got closer to the end of the road, I saw about 10 people all wearing these creepy clown masks. They were all standing anywhere from 1 to 10 feet into the woods. It was like a herd of deer all looking at me as I approached. I was instantly creeped out. I slammed on my brakes on the narrow road. I wanted to turn around, and I knew that I needed to turn around, but there was no space on the road to do so. So I turned my car and then hit reverse, and then started going back and forth to slowly turn my car around with the small space that I had. As I was doing this, I saw some of the clowns start to emerge from the woods. A few of them began to walk in my direction. They were maybe 100 feet away from me, and I scrambled to go faster. Soon, the clowns started to jog after me. It was one of the creepiest things I've ever seen. By the time I finally got my car all the way turned around, they were now running at me. I quickly hit the gas, and at least 5 clowns were all sprinting towards my car. I got out of there before they caught up with me, and then went back to the other road. I didn't look back, and then I drove until I found a longer way around the area that led back to my neighborhood. Eventually, I made it back home, and I could not believe what had just happened. I didn't know how to explain it. The next day when I went to work, there was no roadblock or construction or anything. I was able to drive down the road that had been completely closed off, no problem. It makes me think that the signs were put there possibly by those clowns. Was it just a prank to scare people driving by, or was it something worse? What would have happened if those clowns had caught up with me? I don't know, but I'm glad I don't have to find out. This happened like 5 years ago when I was on a road trip with my friend at the time, John. I have no plans to ever go on another road trip with that guy again. I don't like driving much, so we made an agreement before where we would take his car and he would drive the entire trip, but I would pay for all the gas. This was a big mistake because John would never stop for food. He only stopped at gas stations and he would only eat candy the entire time. I tried eating all gas station food the first day, but I got tired of it and I wanted something else. I asked John to stop, but he refused and said that he was driving so he could go wherever he wanted. He said if I had a problem with the candy diet, then it's too bad. His dinner for that night was toothpaste candy, which he ended up spilling in the back seat. Anyways, on the second night we'd been driving all day and I was starving. Sometime a little after dark, John stopped for gas and more candy at another gas station. This time though, I saw that there was a Subway not too far away from the gas station within walking distance. I don't really remember where we were. It felt like we were almost in the middle of nowhere. There wasn't much else around aside from the gas station and the subway. There was just another gas station across the street too, and that was basically it. The subway was across this other quiet street and sort of down a hill, so it wasn't right next door or anything, but I could see it. After John got gas, which I had to pay for, he went inside to stock up on more toothpaste candy. I decided while he was inside I would walk to the subway and finally get an actual meal. This subway was more of an odd-looking one. I know that there's so many subways around and they're in all types of different buildings. This one was rather small though, and it looked kind of old and outdated. The parking lot was also small, but I figured it would be just fine. A subway is a subway. However, when I finally got to the parking lot, I looked inside. About half the lights inside appeared to be off, and it seemed like they might be closed. I'm not sure why, but I tried the door anyways. It opened, and I went inside. But when I got in, I couldn't see anybody around at all. The place was completely empty, and so I figured that they must be closed. After taking a few more steps, I realized that they were in fact closed. And I don't just mean they closed for the night. It looked like the place was not in business at all, because I didn't see any food. As I was standing around inside just looking, I heard somebody coming from the back room area. I didn't know who it would be, so I just turned around to get out of there. I didn't look back, but when I walked out the door, I heard whoever it was go from the back room to behind the counter. When I had made it outside, I looked over through the window, and I saw this guy standing inside behind the counter and looking at me. I couldn't tell much of what he looked like, but I just decided to keep going. I walked back up the hill and across the grass area to get to the gas station parking lot again. As I was doing this, I heard a door open and close a ways back. I looked over and saw a man now walking around the subway. It was the same guy who I had seen. The man was wearing a gray hooded sweatshirt with the hood up, and he was also wearing black sweatpants. I looked away again and made it the rest of the way up to the gas station parking lot. There I looked back and I saw the man was still walking towards me. He was a ways up the hill now. It was perfect timing because John was just walking out of the gas station with a bag filled with candy. I quickly hopped inside of his car, and as soon as John got in, I told him to drive. I looked over and I saw the guy now walking into the gas station parking lot and heading in our direction still. John left, and I saw the guy starting to run in basically the opposite direction now. We drove through that town past the subway sort of to get back to the highway. When we had merged back onto the highway, like maybe 2 or 3 minutes later, a car pulled up behind us. It started tailing us pretty close, which was saying something because John was going at least 10 over. He even moved over to let the car by, but it did not pass us. It just stayed right on our tail. That's when I thought that maybe it was the guy from the subway. We kept driving, and no matter if John changed lanes or slowed down, the car remained right behind us. I couldn't tell who was behind the wheel though because it was too dark out to see. The car kept following us for a good 20 minutes or so. Then finally it stopped. I don't know what prompted it to stop, but it just randomly turned off at an exit. Then we kept going with the trip. Looking back, I'm not sure what was going on there. Was that guy breaking into the subway or up to something sketchy and that's why he followed me? Was he just the subway owner and mad at me because I walked in after close? Maybe the car following us wasn't even that same guy and I'm just paranoid. I really think that it was though, but I'll never know for sure, I guess. That made for a very interesting moment from the road trip though. About a year ago, I was at Chipotle with a friend. One of my closest friends, Amy, and I were there sometime in the early afternoon. It wasn't really that busy inside of the Chipotle, but there were a few other people around. We were sitting at one end at a small table. I remember that at one point I got up to get some more lemonade. It was then that this random guy walked up and approached me. He was wearing cargo shorts, a t-shirt, and had brown hair that was sort of gray as well. The guy appeared to be in his 40s or so and walked right up to me. Then he said that he had to show me something. At that point, he started to walk away and kind of waved me over. Now, I have really no idea why I followed him, but I did. I didn't really think at all, just reacted. The way he said it made me think he was just going to the other end of the restaurant, and I was curious as to what he was talking about. But then the guy opened the one side door to the Chipotle, not the main door. This one led out to the patio area. It was a nice day, but nobody was sitting out there. We walked outside, and then the guy just kept going. He started to walk off the Chipotle property and into the parking lot of a nearby business. This parking lot was fairly large and also had a good amount of cars in it. I believe that a grocery store was the main business for that lot, but there were a few others as well. When we had made it maybe 20 feet into the parking lot, I realized that this was really strange. I asked the guy what he wanted to show me, but he didn't answer me. He just made another hand gesture for me to keep following him. I wasn't going to though. At that point, I stopped and I turned around and walked back to the Chipotle. I didn't hear the man say anything, and I'm not sure if he realized right away that I had stopped following him because he wasn't looking at me. So at that point, I just went back inside and rejoined Amy at the table. She was confused and hadn't seen me leave, but noticed that I was gone for a long time. I told her about what happened, and we both agreed that it was really strange. For the rest of the time that we were inside eating, though, the man did not return. We stayed and talked for a while, and we were there for maybe 20 more minutes. Then we left the Chipotle to go to my car, which was in the parking lot. I remember that when I parked, there were no cars on either side of me, but now there was an SUV that was parked right next to my car. As we were approaching, the same man emerged from the driver's seat of the SUV. My heart sank when I saw him. He started walking up to us and then asked me directly why I didn't follow him. I said that I had to go back, and I asked him what it was that he was trying to show me. He didn't say, but he just said that he would give me a ride and motioned for me to get into his car. Then he walked back over to his SUV and told me to get inside and opened up one of the doors. I said no thanks, we had to be going now. By this point, the man was acting beyond sketchy. Amy and I quickly got inside of my car. The man ran around though and then came up to my driver's window. I heard him telling me to get out and that I needed to go with him. I yelled loudly that he needed to leave us alone or I was going to call the police. The man finally stopped and took a few steps back. Then I put the car into reverse and started leaving. However, after backing up a few feet, the man suddenly raced over and kicked the fender of my car pretty hard. I kept backing up and then turned and put the car in drive and left. Thankfully, the man didn't try to follow us in his car, and when I looked afterwards, my car had no damage. But something about that guy was really strange. I'm not sure what exactly his plan was. Where was he trying to lead me to? I'm not really sure, but I hope that I never see him again. For almost a year, I worked at a Subway restaurant in my local town. I was able to become a manager there, and the town that I lived in was pretty small, so I often worked by myself. I was able to open or close the store if I needed to, and we usually wouldn't be that busy. It's more of a rural area, so other than weekends or the early evening, it was never that busy. One night, I was working a closing shift by myself. For the last few hours, it was dead and we barely had any customers. When we closed, I did some cleaning and final tasks, locked up, and then left for the night. I got to my car, which I had parked kind of far away in the parking lot. You see, the parking lot to the Subway is connected with this other parking lot. That was for an office building, and it sort of went around a corner. As I sat in my car reading some texts before leaving, I could still see the Subway sort of. I noticed a man walk up to the doors and try to open them. I wasn't quite sure where this man had come from because no other cars were around. But after trying to open the doors, the man did not leave. He just kept standing there, and I could see that he was looking inside now. I decided to go let him know that we were closed, so I started my car and then I began driving towards the man through the parking lot. I remember that as I was doing this, he looked over at me and then started to walk away from the Subway. I drove a little bit closer, stopped, and rolled down my window. I said that the Subway was closed and told him the time that we closed at. He just said okay and then continued walking off. Then I drove away and went home. So the next night, I was working the exact same shift. I was by myself closing again, and it was a pretty similar night to the previous one. We didn't get very many customers, and then I closed up and left like usual. This time, though, after leaving, I was low on fuel, so I went over to the gas station that was nearby. The station was about a half-mile down the road, but in the opposite direction from where I had to go to get home. So I went back there and filled my tank. Then I was back on the quiet road going home again. There wasn't really anybody else out on the roads at this hour. This road happened to go right by my work of Subway again. When I drove past, I looked over, probably because I worked there. However, when I did, I saw that there was a man standing next to one of the windows. This wasn't something that was that easy to see if you were just driving by, but I was able to notice him. It was a side window that he was at, and the man was standing in the grass, so it looked really strange. I wasn't sure what was going on, so I slowed down and pulled over to the side of the road. When I did, I had a little bit better view of the guy, and he looked just like the man from the night before. This was really strange. After stopping on the side of the road for less than 10 seconds, the man turned around and looked over at me. That's when I saw him turn back around and start jogging away from the Subway. Pretty soon, he was out of my sight. After him running away like that, I realized that he was probably going to try to break in. I stayed where I was for a minute or so longer, and then I drove away. When I did though, I called the police non-emergency number and alerted them about it. It was very suspicious if nothing else. The next day the subway was fine and had not been broken into or anything, and for the next few times that I worked at night, I didn't encounter the man or anything strange at all. But like 2 weeks after this, I saw on the internet a news story that a subway across town had been broken into. I don't know, but I'm guessing that maybe it was the same guy. Maybe he just changed locations after I kept foiling his plans. Who knows, but I'm glad that he didn't break into the subway that I worked at. For a little bit of background to this story, I live alone. My house is way out in the country, and it's in a very quiet city. The street has no sidewalk, and in fact is a cul-de-sac, and I'm towards the end of it. My house isn't that big or anything, but everyone's yard is a decent size. Everything in general is more spread out, and I know most of my neighbors, and most of them know me as well. So going back to last year, it all started one night. I remember that I was at home, and it was a little bit later at night. For whatever reason, I was looking out one of the front windows. I don't remember exactly why I was, but I just know that I saw somebody jogging down the street. It was a man who was somewhat tall and thin, and he jogged pretty slow down the side of the street. He was kind of looking around as he jogged, like he was really taking in the scene that was around him. It wasn't like the typical jogger who is zoned in on running. He ended up soon going out of my sight. Now, this is really nothing strange, but it was out of the ordinary for my neighborhood. We literally never had joggers or people walking down the road. I knew this guy wasn't one of the neighbors, and for whatever reason, it seemed kind of odd to me. Obviously, though, there was nothing that I could do about it, and ultimately, I didn't think that it was anything. The most logical thought is that the guy lived a ways away and was just out for a jog, or maybe he was staying with a neighbor. It was a little strange that it was like 10 p.m. though. The next night, even a little bit later than that, I happened to notice the guy again. I promise you, I don't just sit and stare out my front window all night, so I don't know how I happened to see him 2 nights in a row, but I did. It gets worse though, because I actually saw him again later that night. This time he was walking though, and once again looking around at all the houses. He walked to the end of the cul-de-sac, then walked back. I still didn't think too much of it. By the next day, I had forgotten all about the guy. Now, fast forward to the next night. No, I didn't see the jogging man again this night. I just had a normal evening, and when it got late, I went up to go to bed. My bedroom is upstairs in the house and at the back end of it as well. I have a little window looking out to the backyard. Now, I kid you not, right as I was about to crawl into bed, I looked out of my window into the backyard. When I did, I saw a guy standing there walking along the back side of it, and he was wearing a clown mask. He wasn't dressed as a clown. He had normal clothing on of dark-colored sweatpants and a sweatshirt, but he was wearing this creepy clown mask over his face. It honestly kind of resembled Ronald McDonald. Based on the build though, I just thought that it might have been the guy who had been jogging around the neighborhood. It looked similar, and I was connecting the dots. The man continued walking, and then seemed to turn around and go back the opposite way. Soon he was out of my sight, and appeared to maybe be off my property as well. I decided to go downstairs and investigate. When I got down there, I looked out of just about every window in the house. I didn't see the guy, and I figured that he was gone. I wasn't sure what that was all about. Why was a clown man in my backyard? And was it really the same man who had been jogging around the neighborhood? Something fishy was going on. I stayed up downstairs for a little while. I wasn't tired anymore, and I hate trying to sleep when I'm not tired, so I decided to sit down on the couch and watch TV until I could relax again and get sleepy. I sat down there for probably about 20 minutes. Then I heard a noise from the back end of the house. I got up and looked out of a window. The clown man was back. But not only that, now he was at my back door, and it looked like he was trying to get inside. I had a gun at the time, but it was upstairs in my bedroom and was locked up. I had never had to use it in my time living there, and had it for a long time. I should have brought it downstairs, but I just forgot, which makes me feel dumb looking back. But that's just what happened. I went over to the door and yelled loudly that I had a gun and I would shoot the guy if he broke in. I was hoping that would scare him off, and I wouldn't need to even get my gun. But his response was not what I was expecting. Not only did he not go away, but I heard from the other side of the door the clown laughing. It was this creepy laugh, the way you would expect a scary clown to. Then I ran upstairs to actually get my gun. By now my adrenaline was really going, and I got up into my room, got the gun, and then went back downstairs. However, when I arrived back down there, the clown was gone. I opened up the back door and looked around. I went all through the backyard, but he wasn't there. He must have finally ran away. I called the police and reported a suspicious clown man and possible attempted break-in. They came to my house and I spoke with them for a while. After that night, he did not return, and I also didn't see the jogging man either. I really think that it was the same guy, and that possibly he was scouting out the houses disguised as a jogger or something, because that was really suspicious. I live in an apartment complex that's fairly new, and it's located pretty close to a few businesses. Many nights I go on walks when the weather is good, because there's a sidewalk that goes around my apartment complex. It also goes past several of the businesses and along a few streets as well. It's a nice and easy route to walk, and I prefer that over going on a treadmill. So one night I went for a walk a little bit later than usual at around 9 p.m. It was a nice night though, and the weather was good. I had worked late and wanted to get some fresh air and exercise, so I started walking, and basically the route that I took went past the apartment complex. Then I would cross the street, go past a few businesses, and then turn at the corner and walk another way that went back around the complex. It was a loop that would take about 15 minutes to walk, and I would usually walk 2 or 3 laps of it. On this night, things were very quiet with it being a little bit later. Sometimes other people would be out walking their dogs, but I didn't see anyone. So I made it past the apartment complex, and I was walking past some businesses. One of those was a Chipotle. I remember looking over as I went past, and I saw this man walking out of it. He seemed to look over at me, but he was really far away, well over 100 feet. I just looked away and kept walking. I continued with my walk and eventually turned and went along the street. I made it back around to my apartment a while later and then decided to walk another lap, maybe 2. So I continued on, and eventually I was walking past the Chipotle again. When I did, I noticed that the man who I had seen was still there. This was pretty strange. It was like 15 or 20 minutes later, but the guy looked like he had barely moved 5 feet. He was just standing around next to the building and appeared to be looking right at me. I looked at him for a moment and then continued. The man then seemed to start walking in my direction. I just kept going and didn't look back at him. I reached the corner and turned where I usually did, and then started walking along the street. It wasn't until about 5 minutes later that I looked behind me. When I did, I noticed that the man was there walking a pretty far ways back. I found this odd, but I wasn't nervous or anything yet. I kept going, and after turning another corner, I looked behind me once again. After a short time, I saw the man come around the corner. He was still walking behind me. I told myself that it was just a coincidence, and at that point, it very well could have been. I didn't look behind me for a long time, not until I got to my apartment again where I would start and end the walks. There I glanced back, and the man was still there, but still a long ways behind me. I had been planning on doing another lap. I had a sort of bad feeling, like maybe the man was following me. Still, I told myself that I was just being paranoid, and I kept going. So I continued walking, and when I got towards the Chipotle again, the man was still behind me, except now he looked closer than before. Now I knew this was not a coincidence. Why would he leave the Chipotle just to walk around and then go back to it? I started walking faster and told myself not to look back. About 10 minutes later, when I was by the street, I couldn't help myself and I looked. The man was still there and even closer to me than before, even after I had started walking faster. Now I was regretting doing another lap, and I just wanted to get back to my apartment. As I kept walking, I could sense that the guy was getting closer and closer. I continued at my fast pace. I turned at the corner before my apartment, and I was nearly running. I didn't look back or anything. Finally, I reached my apartment building. It was not the main door to the place, but a side one. I went inside quickly and made sure that the door shut and locked. Then I started going up the stairs, which were right there. When I got to the second floor, I looked out of the window in the stairwell. I saw the man standing there and trying to open the door, but he couldn't get in, so clearly he didn't live there. When I was looking at him, he looked up and noticed me, and then he started knocking on the door. I ignored it and quickly moved away from the window and went to my apartment. After that, I made sure not to walk at night for a while. I'm not sure what that man wanted or who he was, but it's very strange. I used to work at a company sort of in the city, and I would work night shifts there. I'd usually get off at like midnight, and overall I didn't mind it too much. One time when I was working one night, it was time for my break at about 8:30 p.m. I left the office and I walked out to this Subway restaurant that was within walking distance from work. It wasn't that far away, and the restaurant was sort of on the edge of the city area, and I walked over there. When I got inside that night, I recall that nobody else was in there except for an employee behind the counter. I walked up, ordered, got a sandwich, and then went over to the other end of the subway. There was a long high table area with a bunch of stools facing this large window that looked outside. That's where I went and sat down. You could see what was a sidewalk going between the subway and another building. It was sort of like an alleyway, and to the right was the street, which was very quiet now. As I was sitting there for maybe 5 minutes, I saw somebody starting to walk up on the sidewalk. This person appeared to be a man who was wearing a rather large jacket and baggy pants. He walked up to the sidewalk that went right in front of the window where I was sitting. I assumed that he would pass by in front of me and go down the alleyway. However, when the man got even with me, he stopped, and then he turned and started looking at me. It was really weird. The man was now standing there, facing me right on the other side of the window and staring at me. He wasn't waving to me or trying to communicate in any way. He was just standing there. It was kind of creepy. After like 10 or 15 seconds, I realized that he wasn't going to leave. I tried to ignore him and I just looked down. But when I looked up a short time later, he was still there and still just staring at me. At that point, I decided to move. I got up and I walked away from the window and to the other end of the subway. Then I sat down at a different table facing away from the window, just barely within view of it. I tried to just ignore the guy, and I also hoped that he wouldn't come inside the subway. He never did enter, and a while later I looked to the window again and he was finally gone. When my break was over, I left the subway and walked back to the office. Then I finished with work for the next few hours. When I got off a little bit after midnight, I was about to leave. When I got towards the doors though, I looked out into the parking lot. I saw the same guy there. The man who had been staring at me at Subway was now in my work parking lot. He was standing sort of in the middle of it. He wasn't right by my car or anything, but I would have to walk past him to get to my car. I was glad that I saw him before I left the building. I decided to wait. At that hour, not very many people were there anymore, so nobody else was in the parking lot. There were a few cars scattered around, but I didn't want to take a chance. I waited around near the door inside, looking out every so often. The man stayed there, just kind of standing around for at least 10 minutes. Finally, I looked back and I saw him walking away. As soon as he made it off the property, I sprinted to my car, got inside, and drove home. I was really glad to make it away from him. I'm not sure what that guy was doing that night. It was really creepy the way he just stood there both times and the way he was staring at me. I live by myself, and my house is out in the country a little bit. I haven't lived here for that long, about 2 years now. The backyard to my house is very large, and there's a big woods taking up most of it. One night, when I was at home by myself, the weather was very nice. I opened up a back window to get a bit of a breeze in the room that I was in and to cool it down. Sometime later on in the night, with the window being open, I heard a noise coming from what sounded like the edge of the woods. I walked over and then looked outside, thinking maybe another deer was in my yard. What I saw instead shocked me. I saw a man, fully dressed as a clown from head to toe, sprinting through the woods. He briefly came out of the woods just in front of the trees before darting back in. The guy was running extremely fast, like a full sprint. He never looked over at me or my house, and I could see the long green hair from the clown mask blowing in the wind. After making it past me, he continued through the woods, now way out of my sight. I was left in shock at what I had just seen. It was probably a total of like 3 seconds that I saw the guy because he was running so fast. I was wondering why, but I was also wondering where did he come from and where was he going. I didn't have any prankster neighbors that I was aware of or anything. I kept watching out the window for a good amount of time, but I never saw the clown come back and I didn't hear anything either. Maybe an hour or so later, I was still curious about it, so I decided to go outside. I walked out my back door and stepped into the yard. There was an open space of grass and my patio back there before it was pretty much surrounded by woods. When I got outside, it was very calm and quiet. I only heard the sound of the leaves blowing in the wind. I walked around the backyard and even took a few steps into the woods. I didn't hear or see anything strange at all. Apparently, it seemed as though the clown had just run through the woods in my yard and that was it. He hadn't left anything or done anything. I kept walking around my yard and I soon got to the side of my house. From there, I can sort of see my next door neighbor's house even though it's a good distance away. I just remember that I looked over and I saw something in the window. On the second floor, I noticed the clown. He was inside of the house and looking at me. It gave me the creeps to see. I was pretty sure that an older woman lived in that house and I wasn't aware of anybody else who lived there. but I didn't think that it was her who ran through my yard or was pretending to be a clown. I had met her once, but I didn't really know her. I figured she maybe had somebody over, maybe a kid or grandkid who was messing with me. After that, I went back inside of my house. For the next few days, nothing strange happened, and I sort of forgot about the clown. But then I happened to be outside in the front door, and I saw my next door neighbor was out as well. I remembered what had happened, and I decided to talk to her. I walked over and I asked her if anybody else lived with her or was staying with her several days before. She said no. I told her about what happened with the clown and stuff. She told me that she had no idea what that would have been, because she was sure that nobody was in her house, and she also told me that she had been gone that night. When I heard this, it sort of freaked me out. I really didn't know how to explain it, and I still don't. Since then, I haven't seen the clown or anything. My neighbor still lives there by herself, and she hasn't found any clowns or guys living there too. I'm not sure if that clown guy broke into her house that night or what. Either way, it was very strange.